white people in the video, so there's no like race draw to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was in Maryland. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. But I would say that there's more tolerance towards white people for doing stuff like that, you know, than there are towards black people, because we go back to the lady with the blinker, and then you have this guy saying, I want the governor to suck my dick.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. That's just, so in my situation, that was an example of a very good cop, because they let him know that they can't arrest him, but they let him know that people were complaining.
Okay.
And he took like every swing that he could, and he still couldn't get like a big drama. Yeah. That he was going for,
I think within what you were with utilitarianism and the greatest good of people and like those model figures in society, I think that this guy would be that person, you know, because there are people who believe that all cops are bad, ACAP, but then there's people like that, you know, who were just, he just informed him. He didn't do, like, it was neutral, you know, it wasn't, like, nowadays neutral is good, which it's like a sliding scale, when I think we should go back to neutral should just be the norm, you know, like, we shouldn't have to look so hard for model people in society, but it is good that there are people like that, you know?
Yeah. And, one thing I don't like is, what was the word? Oh, gosh darn it.
I think one thing I want to include is just, as a cop, there is, you know, potential death every day. I mean, it doesn't matter what the situation is, you know. Just just putting yourself in the situation as, you know, pulling someone over, and just the thought that they might just have a gun right on their lap and he just might shoot you, you know. So I think it's something that cops do need to realize, you know. And there is a tense of having an exaggeration of the situation. Like, you know, you might you have cops that might be like, well, you're gonna have cops that are way more aggressive in a situation where it's just a ticket, and then you always have your cop that, you know, is really calm, but, you know, the guy pulls out a shotgun and stuff like that. So it's always, you know, really hard, I believe, for a cop psychologically, because you're going through it every single day. So I think cops, I mean, just need to be aware, and I believe it is something that, you know, a health issue as well, with what goes on and how they handle the situation, you know, so with good actions.
So do you think that psychological stress tips our disposition towards, like, because fear is just a feeling, you know? Aristotle describes feelings as just neutral. Yeah. Do you think that, like, that psychological stress of, like, having to, I guess we were also talking about how, like, some places where violence, like, the cities, cops are under a lot more stress than, like, let's say, rural places. So let's say a cop in a city, Dallas, would make that fear turn into rashness, because that would be the vice of excess, just to, like, cover all of their grounds.
And I feel like all of the stress that they experience is on the decision, like the moral decision of asking yourself, do I need to use lethal force in this situation? I don't think I said it in my paper this exact way, but to better evaluate the situation, you have to really ask yourself, where is the point of that I have to use lethal force with this suspect or in this situation? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like the biggest line that police officers have to draw for themselves.
Okay, well, I'll give you guys another example. There was a case in Fort Worth about a year ago of a woman who, she was hanging out with her niece playing video games, and one of the neighbors called the police innocently that, like, their front door was open. The front door was open because it was hot outside. However, the police thought that there was someone inside. I guess the guy hadn't announced himself that he was there, and she pulled out her gun, being her right, you know, to protect herself within her own home. And the police officers saw the black woman with her gun inside her home and shot her and killed her in front of her niece. And so, what about in a situation like that? Like,
I would argue that you can't use it just because it's so built for disaster. You know what I mean?
that's true, but the only way that
Like the cops were called because of the open door by a neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm sure the neighbors insinuated that the place had been robbed or something off was going on.
Maybe, yeah.
So, I mean, you've got an officer walking
It was
into
unusual.
a situation where they have no clue, and I'm sure the neighbor had insinuated the door was open for ill reasons, and so they're on edge. And then I feel like I don't know. It's just a bad situation that has no positive outcome, no matter how you look at it. But it was set up to have that terrible thing happen.
Well, let's think it through. There's procedure, right? He trespassed into the backyard and shot her through the window.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Josh?
I don't know. I mean, it's a really good question to really think about that situation. You know, because you can really just.
I thought you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's a really like mental process of how to deal with it.
So when the officer shot her, he was outside and she was inside.
Yeah, he shot her through the window. Now I understand that there is the fear that he saw someone through the window pointing a gun at him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was her right to have a gun in the first place, and I don't know if
Did she know it was the police though?
I don't know. He didn't
She
announce
probably
himself.
didn't.
Well, no, that's the issue. He didn't announce himself.
Yeah.
And so, but the thing is, I understand.
You have to announce yourself. You have to.
There were like miscommunications there, but my issue with the whole thing was that after he got terminated, there is like this lobbying group. It's like this police lobbying group that like when bad things happen to cops, there's basically like they take their cases and like there's like a lawyer like on retainer to basically protect police interests, and they took his case immediately, even though he was clearly in the wrong because he hadn't announced himself and trespassed, and he had a partner with him, but there was like, it was unclear, and there's like this
I'm
safety
sure
net.
I'm sure that they argued that he had like, what's the word? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Like, to me, there can't be police reform without accountability.
100%. Yeah, and that accountability has to come from their superiors, because if the superiors aren't respecting, or if they're disrespecting, like a mission statement that they may have, that's just going to carry over from the head officer to the lower officer. And because in the police world, whatever, like respect to authority is valued so highly, that's why the top guys really have to bear down on it.
The thing is, I believe he was terminated without paid leave. Mm-hmm. Like, he was terminated. The police department didn't want to deal with this because it was a liability issue. But there's safety nets within society for police officers outside of the police department for them to... There's never any sort of accountability because there's, like, those protections, and then whenever you go against them, like, in public courts, you're going against law enforcement in a public court. Like, it's just... It almost seems like we have so many protections from the government and the Constitution, yet we don't have any protections against the police in society. And so that's my problem. But going back to virtue ethics, I feel like we should try to pull back. I think that you're absolutely right that, like, education could probably deter some of these things from happening. He was a pretty recent police officer, and so, like, maybe protocol wasn't fresh on his mind. But if there is, like, this instinct of fear, he should have been, like, more aware, because this is his entire job, Like, it's not just, like, a random circumstance. Like, he works in Fort Worth, pretty big city. Like, these sort of things, unusual things will happen. So if it wouldn't have happened with her, I personally believe it would have happened somewhere else,
I'm sure that his lawyers argued, like, he had reasonable suspicion not to announce himself. Just because the type of call that was made, a door open. I like to hear the neighbor's phone call, because if they were saying, "My neighbor's house just got broken into," they're responding to a break-in.
I think that they had said that it was unusual to see the door open, but it was a very hot summer day.
There's no telling, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm saying that, like, it would be a very hard one to use, just because the situation is just, it's set up to fail. Because if he's coming in there thinking it's a robbery, and then she has a gun and he has a gun, and he doesn't announce himself like he's supposed to, that's just a bad situation gone worse.
And so if we go back to our list of questions, and my own perception of reparations would be to defund the police, because these sort of issues shouldn't be happening in the first place if they didn't have so many things on their plate to deal with. Like, there's only so much training you can do in 6 months to deal with so many issues, and, like, I guess this would be probably one of the more standard things for a police officer to, like, respond to, like, something unusual, like the door of a home being open. But I feel like those 6 months, it goes back to the education. Within those 6 months, they should, I don't know what all is covered, but this should be addressed to the point where, like, this shouldn't have happened.
So my proposal would be to change it from 6 months to 2 years, like a trade school would be. But to do that, you definitely have to increase the funding. And I will say that in Minneapolis, or wherever the bad riots happened, they defunded the police there, and it went really bad. Like, crime jumped, and because there was no policemen, because they all quit.
But there's also no existing protocol to replace what has been taken away.
Yeah, but then you come in and you say, well, now we put in military police, and military police and police, you're essentially saying, I don't like you, I want the worst guys. You know what I mean?
The worst guys?
Yeah, the guys that are bigger assholes.
Okay, so it's closer to...
So you're really getting rid of what you got to get a greater evil. In my opinion, I'd say that the military police are...
Because it's
like, if you were to bring in the National Guard, which is what I think they had proposed in the government, that's essentially like a policing military. It's like the military police.
So did they bring in the National Guard, or did they bring in the Army?
They'd bring in the National Guard, I think.
And
even then, it's technically like a military law. Not really, but the laws are still the same, but it's being enforced by the military.
Okay. And from what I understand, the National Guard is not trained the same way that the police academy.
I don't think the military has a community aspect to it. You know what I mean? How a police force has a community aspect. Like a National Guard's national. Like, everything's it, and you can't complain.
It gives more of like a martial law feeling to it.
Like, you can complain, but they're not going to do nothing for you.
What do you think about defunding the police?
It's an issue that, I mean, the world has really seen both ways, and I think it's a good thing, I mean, and a bad thing, you know, because obviously you get, like, you have good cops and bad cops, and you don't really want to defund. I mean, and as, you know, I think an average salary of, you know, or depending on the chief, he's an executive, you know, on the officer, you know, they average around like $50,000 a year, and I mean, it would be defunding that part. I mean, and you also have their objectives, like, their academy. What would they bring in? Their vehicles, their training. I think it'd be better off if we would probably enhance some things in better ways and just defunding them. And most likely, if we defund them, I feel like some situations, if defunding them, would be worse, you know?
Okay.
So, I feel like the defunding part is we could just like switch it up and it's a difficult thing to talk about because, it's
So you're saying redirecting funds instead of taking funds away?
Yeah, just redirecting funds where we actually need them more.
Where would we redirect them? Like within the same police force, or?
I think just in having trainings that involve more psychological challenges.
So it goes back to